Right. Thank you. Welcome to the Quizzical Spirit podcast. I'm Ross Hightower.
And I'm Deb Heim.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the food in the books of the Spirit Song saga. Um, Now, it's typical that I don't really describe things in a lot of detail because, um, in my opinion, people are able to, you know, imagine something way better than I could describe. But there are a few places where I describe the food. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to read a few passages, a couple passages, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what Deb has done um, with regard to the food. All right, so one of the things, food's really important to the Alle'oss. They are very oriented to festivals, and part of that's because we live in Milwaukee, and in the summer there's basically a festival every week.
And it's
And
because
there's
it's so
Italian festivals this
cold
week.
in the winter that everything
Hmm.
blows up in the summer. When
Hmm.
when you have
Hmm.
warm weather after a cold winter where you've spent all of it inside, you can
Right.
just feel the pent up energy.
Yeah. And one of the festivals I want to go to this summer is Irish Fest. I mean, that was one
Yeah.
of the first fests we went to, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to do that. But we have festivals all summer.
Pride Fest, Italian Fest,
Native American,
everything.
French. Yeah, it's just everything.
Hmm.
So that's probably part of what informed me when I was writing about the Alle'oss people. But also, the Alle'oss people are very community oriented,
Hmm.
family oriented, and festivals a big part of that.
Right.
The music, the dancing, the food,
The
um,
stories.
a real stories. It's a real celebration of life, and
Right.
that's in a contrast to the empire, which is very different.
Right.
So food is a big part of that. One of the things that I describe, or mention, or and describe in a little bit of detail many times are the hand pies, which is something
Yeah.
that,
They sound so good.
yeah,
They
which
sound
is
like something you would just love.
yeah, right,
Oh,
and which is why I don't describe in more detail because you just can imagine this really delicate crust, and some filling that it just makes your mouth water. So a little bit more on that later, but so one of the places I actually went into a little bit of detail about the food is in Argren Blue. Trying to find it, I had it marked out, and then I can't
well,
believe this.
while Ross is figuring that out, I can talk a little bit about um, the idea of we do a lot of discussions about what kind of meats they would use, what kind of vegetables, what kind of spices, um, based on they live in the mountains and there's no refrigeration. Like what would limit how they eat
Right.
and what things would they put up for the winter. And often those festivals are like, yay, we made it through the winter,
Hmm.
or
Right.
yay, the harvest came in.
Yeah.
um
So like the early summer festival, which is where they mark their ages, right?
their birth
So
well,
and
their
and
ages. Yes, I made
and
it through.
yeah,
I'm 40 summers.
yeah, I have 40 summers or whatever. There are not many fruits and vegetables because it's early summer, right? So it's a
Right.
lot of preserved foods and
Foods left
venison,
over from the end of
yeah,
last season, like the
pork,
last of the
right?
apples.
Hmm.
And yeah, and that kind of informs the things that I've made
Yeah.
to kind of fit
Uh,
in with that.
Whereas the harvest festival, there'd be a lot of fruits and vegetables, squash, and corn, and things like that.
Right. And a lot of putting up, like, what do like putting it up for the winter, and they have a
Yeah.
root cellar,
Hmm.
and they dry things, and they do
Right.
what all pioneer or
Yeah.
people previously
So
did.
there have to be a lot of foods that preserve easily, like
Right.
sausages and smoked meats and things like that, especially when they're traveling. So one of the places that I talk about a little bit about the food was in Argren Blue when Harold, who's an inquisitor, is sitting in a tavern with Henrik, and he's talking about the scents of the food that the aromas, and he says,
And hang on. Let's just note that Harold is Volbrock. But he lived in in the Volan Empire. He's not a native of Argren at all.
no, but he comes to love Argren because he
Yes.
grew up on the streets in a very poor part of the imperial capital, and the peace and the acceptance, the peace of the mountains and the acceptance of the people are very attractive to him. And
Right.
this is the first time he's really traveled to um, a Alle'oss city in Argren. So he says, um, they woke that morning to a cold gray day, and while they sat in the alehouse, the first snowflakes of the season began drifting in the still air. Even so, as evening approached, the scene gathered energy. A variety of scents wafted through the open window: the rustic, uniquely spiced fare of the Alaos, the elegant, rich cuisine of the Empire, even a whiff of the bold spice of the Union. So you have the Empire. You have this sort of traditional French, you know, kind of cuisine with heavy sauces uh, and the Alaos, I very cleverly said unique spices, right? So people could imagine whatever they wanted
Which kinda
to. Yeah,
and we're
and
gonna
then the
talk
bold.
about that in a little bit because I figured out some
Right.
unique spices to use.
Yeah, and the bold spice of the Union, I'm imagining like very spicy, pepper heavy kinds of
Right.
fare. So maybe that's a later thing. And then in Desaltai, one of the things that's sort of kind of a draw that kind of brings the Desaltai, which who are very Polak, and the Alaos together, is this stew that this one person, this man who's a cook at a tavern, has created, a boar stew. And in the first time that the main character Tove encounters this, she says, Um, she says, "Oh, bless the mother," she moaned. She could put it down to the fact she had almost nothing to eat all day, but that wasn't all of it. There was the familiar Alleos herbs and spices, but there was something she didn't recognize, something that added a tanginess that complemented the sweet, nutty flavor of the boar. Right. So, my descriptions are basically to entice you, but they don't give you enough information to really know what's there. So Deb decided she wanted to try to create a boar stew, right?
Yeah.
So you go ahead.
Okay, so here's the thing. One, it had to be rustic, and I used pork. I used pork loin just because
Yeah,
it's an easy piece of
right.
pork to deal with,
I mean,
right?
you can get boar, but it's a risk unless what you're going to do with it.
Yeah. So I used just old-fashioned pig, and I added all. I wasn't sure what time of year it was, but for a rustic stew, it would make sense to use all the root vegetables. So I used carrots, parsnips, rutabaga, and that might have been it. But I cut them all up small, and then I did a beef broth, but what I used for the spices, I did two versions, and the one I liked the best was Norse spices, including juniper and fennel, and I bloomed them in a roux and then added some broth to thin it out, but I bloomed them first in a roux, and if you know what a roux is, it's just butter and flour, which could be done on any campfire
Hmm.
anywhere or any stove anywhere. Butter, flour, those are staples. And in fact, there's a scene with Minna with the flower where they go
Yeah.
in Spirit Sight where it just goes all over the place. Like they have flour, they have mills, they have flour. That's like
Mm-hmm.
a standard thing. So making a roux is would be a standard thing to do, but then to throw the spices in there and let them fill in that flavor just almost to the point where they weren't burning, but I could really smell them. Then I threw in some beef broth from the stew that I had been cooking and then kept working it and then threw it in. And I gotta
Yeah,
tell you, it's
it's really
pretty
good.
good.
Yeah. It's not exactly what I was imagining, but it's really good. Um, and so it's something I hope we make again, or hope Deb makes again.
Yeah, and it was on yeah, me. But but the thing is, it was I took what Ross wrote and said, okay, how am I gonna do this? And um and ginger, there were some other things in there. Ginger root can grow in the
Yeah.
mountains. I mean, we consider it a southern spice, but it can grow turmeric. I did not use turmeric. I mean, root things. All of them were things I could see somebody getting a hold of in a cold climate. That's why I looked at North. But what I find interesting about this to me is eventually coming up with an Argren cookbook, and I would love for our many leads of subscribers and listeners, you know who you are, to
Yeah.
to come up. If you read the books and you love the books and you cook, send it to Quizzical email.com or
Right. Come up with
author
your own
at Ross.
recipes,
Yeah,
and we'll make them and talk about them um, on the
absolutely.
podcast.
We would love that. Like
And
that to
then
me, that kind of sort of thing
tens
would
of people
be
hear about
super awesome.
them. It's a little
Yeah.
like the beer that the
Yes.
Alle'oss there version of an ale in Argren Blue, and I read that
Right.
to the proprietor, and it's
Recipe
very
that
close to what I was thinking that it would be.
was oh my God. And you know what? People
Yeah,
loved
they
that
make a
beer
firkin of that for each of our launches, and they sold out both times.
each time.
It's
And people kept talking about how much they loved that beer.
right.
I yeah,
It's sort of like a Belgian ale, which I really like.
it's a little
Another thing,
flowery, right?
yeah, right. Uh, what another thing that it comes up often in the Alle'oss description of food are the hand pies,
Oh,
and I am, hand pies are something that has a crust, that something you can hold in your hand. And it has a variety of different um, fillings,
usually meat
and
fillings.
meat or strawberries,
Right.
savory fillings. Um, and I definitely want to make some of those. So I'm gonna make a few, and then we can talk about how well they worked on the podcast.
Okay, for Argren Fair, I am dying to find somebody that even just does like empanadas. Like
Mhm.
that is the most close.
It's a lot.
So,
Yeah, our internet is not working that well today.
no, no,
But
it's
let's
not. It
see.
looks like it's
It's,
okay today, but
it still records this work. And so,
I think we're good.
yep.
Hey, where's your intro outro music?
Um, I, that's something we need to